Hey guys, thanks for joining my channel today. My name's Don, and if you're familiar or not familiar with my channel, uh, I enjoy talking about what it's like to be a bass fisherman after the age of 70. I know you're looking at me thinking, "Oh, you couldn't be over 70." Well, I am. I'm going to be 78 this year, and today I've got kind of an unusual topic. Um, it's something I've been thinking about a lot here lately, and it's I want to talk about your first cast and your last cast. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, of course, there's a million casts in between your first and last, but I want to talk about the fact that all of us can probably remember going back maybe 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Some of you, I'm sure, can go back farther than I can. But I'm sure you remember that very first cast, the very first time that you ever had a fishing rod in your hand and you casted it out. Not drop it over the side of a boat, but actually casted it out in the hopes of catching a fish. I can remember, it wasn't that long ago. Um, I can tell you this, that uh, it wasn't it wasn't a remarkable event. If I remember, not so much my first cast as the first time that I went out and I was fishing and I was casting. I can remember it was hard. I can remember that I got backlashes. And when I say first cast, in my case, I was thinking back to the days when I used a bait casting reel for the first time. And back then I was using a Fluger Supreme, and it was tough. I mean, these reels didn't offer much in the way of both a free spool and or brakes. And I mean, it took some patience. It took some skill uh, because not just everybody could do it. And a lot of people gave up. A lot of people just said, I can't do it. It isn't worth these backlashes. We didn't have good line like we have today. We used, for the most part, old black nylon line, and it really didn't lend itself to casting. Our rods were much shorter. As a result, it was harder to cast a lure any real distance. So there were a lot of factors involved. And even though we were young, even though athletically we were in great shape and we could do those kind of things, I think uh, I think my first cast uh, wasn't something that really stood out in my mind. But you know what? Someday I'm going to cast the last time. And that last cast will be after hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of casts that I've made throughout my lifetime. And I don't know if you've thought about it, but that last cast is coming for all of us. That last trip in the boat, it's coming for all of us. At some point, we're not going to be able to fish anymore. And maybe that'll be tomorrow. Maybe that'll be next week, next month. Maybe it'll be next year. Maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I know a couple of guys, one guy in particular, I think he's 93, 94 years old, still out there fishing. He fishes more than I do. Uh, I don't think a last cast is coming up soon for him, but it will come up someday. I wrote a book, and the book is called The Old Man. And what inspired me to write the book was a couple of things. One, it was kind of a prequel to another book that I wrote called Queenie, The Legend of Lake Istapoca. The Old Man really centers on a guy that was born back in the 30s and kind of how he lived his life, how much he enjoyed fishing. He grew up right here where I am in Highlands County. And throughout his life, he made every attempt to fish as often as he could because it's what he really loved. At the same time, the story involves his family and his friends, things that happened during his lifetime. But I can still remember I saw him for the last time in a assisted living community here in Florida. I just happened to be working that day, and one of the gals was having trouble with this new guy that had just come in, and she called me to kind of settle him down. And when I went over, he didn't recognize me. I had met him before. He didn't recognize me. But I talked to him a little bit. We got talking about fishing. He had a couple of old fishing rods in the corner, had a couple of black jitterbugs on them. One was jointed, one was a regular standard jitterbug. And right away I knew who he was. Right away I recognized him. And I'd run into him dozens of times at the boat ramp. But I remember he told me that even though his memory was going, physically his body was shot. He was probably 90, over 90 anyway. I don't really know how old he was, but he had probably fished for the very last time, but he didn't know it. And I say he didn't know it because he had those fishing rods propped up, and as far as he was concerned, he was ready to leave this assisted living anytime and head back out to the lake. Of course, he never did. I mean, he passed away while I was there. So he didn't know when his last cast was. He knew the last time that he had been out, but he didn't know the actual last cast. And the purpose of this video is just to remind you all that you're not going to know when you make your last cast either. You might think it's on that last boat trip, but maybe you go out again. You just don't know. But that last cast is coming for all of us. And it's just something you need to think about. Kind of like your first cast, your last cast is it's gonna be something to remember. And it's my hope that my last cast I catch a fish, because if I don't, it probably won't be my last cast because I don't know how to get a last cast. If you've ever been fishing with me, you've probably heard me say, this is it. This is my last cast. I make that cast, reel it in, and this is my last cast. It's kind of an old joke, but the truth is it's hard to make that last cast. Anyway, if you agree with me or disagree, feel free to leave a comment or two. Just know that, I'm not trying to make light of it because we all have a last cast coming and we all have a last trip coming. Just enjoy what you can today, because today is the only day you really have any control over. And, you can plan a trip for tomorrow. You can plan it for next week, next month, next year. And if you're lucky, if God's willing, you'll get a chance to make that trip. But if not, if something were to happen, this could be the last trip you make, and it could be today. So enjoy it to the fullest. Make every cast count. And, while you're making those last casts, count your blessings, because you're lucky to be out there. A lot of folks don't make it to be my age or older. And sometimes I think we forget, we endure a lot. We have, medical problems that seems like that's all we talk about anymore. But the truth is, we're still on the right side of the dirt. So, make the best of it. Enjoy yourself. Hopefully that last cast is a long way off. So if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you have any comments, leave them down below. And stay tuned. I got a lot more stuff coming. Subscribe to the channel if you're interested in listening to them. Thanks again. Have a great day.